Good. So Shalom Aleichem. Hello, everyone. Good to uh, good to see so many familiar faces. And today we'll be trying to encompass some basic fundamentals of preparing for Pesach. Prep 101 was the title, and we'll be speaking about three sections, even though they are on some level interrelated. We'll speak about cleaning for Pesach. We'll speak about kashering utensils for Pesach. And then we'll speak about some shopping tips of different products that are interesting and worthy of attention. And all of this in a short space of time. Of course, questions are welcome, and I will try to leave some time at the end for questions. So first of all, the basic mitzvah of preparing for Pesach is, of course, ensuring that we don't have any chametz around the house. Chametz is forbidden on Pesach, a very severe prohibition. There's kares on eating chametz, and chametz is so severe that one isn't even allowed to leave it around on Pesach because of the great severity of the prohibition. What is chametz? So, of course, all baked goods are chametz: bread, rolls, pitas, crackers, right? Cookies, cake, pretzels, all of this, right? Baked goods made of any of the five basic grains, right? Wheat, barley, spelt, and so on. These are chametz. And any of these have to be cleared away from the home before Pesach. I know that there's a minhag of doing mechiras chametz. However, the Torah says tashbisu se'or mibatechem. We have to get rid of the chametz. We have to destroy the chametz. Pesach is a time without chametz, and therefore the ideal is to get rid of our chametz. And even though many sell their chametz, but there are many also that chametz gomer, right? Wheat-based noodles, spaghetti, right? Pastas, lasagna, like I said before, cereals, right? Breakfast foods, generally speaking, they're all chametz, right? Cheerios are deadly. You can find them, these teeny tiny Cheerios, in your car seats or between, under the car, under the seats of the car, and so on. All of these are chametz, and all of these should ideally be destroyed or be discarded, be cleaned out of the house before Pesach. I say destroyed because the word of the pasuk is tashbisu, which is a kind of destructive lashon. But to clear our homes of chametz, alcoholic beverages. So beer is chametz, whiskey is chametz. Is it chametz gomer? Yes, we consider it to be chametz gomer. And nevertheless, those who sell whiskey, it's not the same as selling bread, because whiskey is distilled, the alcohol is evaporated from the mead, and that is your whiskey. So, and it's also precious, it's expensive. So we're more forgiving for selling whiskey and less so for selling bread and for selling, the pitas and the crackers and the cookies. Those should really be thrown out lechatchila. Other food items that are chametz and that need to be identified as chametz, right? Couscous, Bulgar wheat, farina, wheat germ, soup nuts, right? All of these are absolutely chametz. Now, there are many products that are not Bulgar wheat and they're not bread, but they contain chametz, right? What we call tyroives chametz. And tyroives chametz has the same balya. You also have to get rid of tyroives chametz. So if you have ingredients like malt, which is made from barley, or wheat gluten, or certain vinegars that are chametz, meaning there are ingredients out there that render foods that are a tyroives, but render them chametz. And therefore it's important to go through the different things that we have at home and ensure that we clear our home of chametz, or to concentrate them in whichever place we have, and to do mechiras chametz, as I mentioned. Let's see, there's some notes on the chat. Soy sauce. Yeah, you have to check. Soy sauce is kidneys because it's made from soya. We'll speak later about kidneys, but it doesn't have to be chametz. And nevertheless, it should be kosher Pesach because it sometimes does contain wheat. So one has to be careful with soy sauce. What isn't chametz? Okay, so first of all, flour. Flour is not chametz. There is something of a controversy concerning our flour because it is washed as part of its preparation, as part of its production. It's washed and then it's dried. And does that raise a concern of chametz? So in the past, there were those who said that there's a concern of chametz, but even many years ago, Rav Chaim Greinman wrote in the name of the Chazon Ish that this is not chametz gomer for sure. The discussion was about, do we want to be machmir to use after Pesach only flour that was ground after Pesach? And Rav Chaim Greinman said that we do not need to worry about that. Shuvas Van Hagais, Rav Moshe Sternbuch, writes that this is he doesn't say the words crazy chumrah, but almost. He says it's mina matmihim, I think he writes, to be machmir on this. And these are poskim who are generally quite machmir poskim, and they're not worried, at least after Pesach. And on Pesach too, one does not have to get rid of one's flour. Flour is not chametz based on what I've managed to ascertain today. The washing and drying is a short process. It's done in order to make it easier to peel off the shell of the wheat, and therefore it would not render our flour chametz. And nevertheless, one shouldn't use regular flour on Pesach out of this concern. It should be put away, and if one's doing a sale of chametz, then this flour will be included in the sale of chametz. And for our purposes, it's not chametz. One doesn't have to throw it out, even though one shouldn't use it on Pesach. On Pesach, one should only use matzah meal or flour which is kosher Pesach. We generally don't use regular flour on Pesach out of concern that through the cooking process it will become chametz. So we don't use flour on Pesach. We use matzah meal instead, and more about that later. Kidneys are not chametz, right? Legumes, grains that are not one of the 5 minim of grains that become chametz, right? So rice and corn and beans and lentils and peas and soy and sesame and all the others and sunflowers, right? All of these are not chametz, but they are kidneys. So the Ashkenazim have a custom of not eating kidneys, but you don't have to throw them out and you don't have to sell them, right? And why? Because these cannot become chametz. So we avoid eating them because they look like grain, or because they were stored with grain, or because they are farmed together with grains. But they're of course not chametz. But beware, right? Quinoa is not chametz. But quinoa looks a lot like bulgur wheat or like couscous, right? Couscous is chametz gomer, and quinoa is not. Okay, and they look quite similar. So beware, be wary of these similarities. Some are not chametz at all, and some are chametz. Of course, there are other products that one has to be cautious of if they're chametz or not. Distilled vinegar, right? Vinegar can be made of chametz products. In the US, because the US is very corn abundant, everything is made from corn alcohol. But that's not true of the rest of the world, and therefore one has to be careful. Extracts, oils, right? These are not chametz, of course. Coffee is not chametz, tea is fine, and so on. And nevertheless, one has to be wary, especially of flavored coffees and so on. We'll speak about that later in the shopping section. What about alcohols, right? Are alcohols chametz? Well, depends, right? Isopropyl alcohol is acceptable, doesn't have any chametz. Ethanol or ethyl alcohol is often made from corn, which is kidneys, or from synthetic materials. However, you can have pure and non-denatured ethyl alcohol, which is derived from grain, and that could be a problem on Pesach. If it's denatured alcohol, then it's unfit for consumption. and therefore it wouldn't be considered chametz because it's not considered food. The only problem of chametz on Pesach is when it's food. If it's not food, then it's not a chametz problem. So denatured alcohol, if it's not fit for consumption, then it's not chametz. Nevertheless, some put it in the sale because you can treat it and render it edible in some way. And therefore some include it in the sale. Ikaridin, one doesn't have to worry about this. Perfumes, ointments, deodorants, those are fine. Lipstick, toothpaste, mouthwash, also fine. Dog food. Dog food is often chametz, and it renders all kinds of questions concerning Pesach. Lechatchila, if one can, I would throw out all potentially chametz dog food, and one can see the ingredients. If it's gluten-free, then it doesn't have chametz, but otherwise it's likely to have chametz, and therefore one should think about getting specially kosher Pesach dog food, or to give homemade food for Pesach. I know it's a headache for dog owners, but this is available, and generally speaking, non-kosher Pesach dog food will be chametz. There's a question concerning, does this have bali rai bali matzeh, because it's often tyrovis chametz, and the question is this fitting for human consumption? Some argue that dog food is fitting for human consumption. Some argue that it isn't. I haven't tried it. I don't know. But this is something of a discussion concerning dog food. Lechatchila, get rid of your year-long dog food and get your special kosher Pesach dog food. Where do we have to check for chametz, right? We're talking about cleaning. So I know we clean everywhere, but sometimes, right, if we're doing miluim, or if we're stressed because of the war, or for whatever reason, we don't want to do our spring cleaning, we just want to do our chametz cleaning, our Pesach cleaning. So one has to check, of course, kitchen, dining area. That's your highest priority. Okay, check your fridge, check your freezer. Sometimes we miss things. In fact, one of the most frequent cases of finding chametz on Pesach is literally in the fridge, because we see something and we think, oh, that's not chametz, and then turns out it's a bottle of beer that somehow got into the fridge and we missed it. So make sure you search carefully. Okay, fridge and freezer, well searched. Cabinets, pantries, empty them all out. Line things up. Make sure you're not leaving anything that might be chametz in your pantries. Otherwise, well, one has to clean for potential chametz, right? High chairs, booster seats, right? There's often chametz that's left around in high chairs, dining tables and chairs. Things get into the corners, into crevices, into all kinds of places. So make sure that those are cleaned thoroughly for Pesach. What else do we have? The general, ovens, stoves need to be cleaned. Don't forget, you have the rubber area of the fridge and of the oven and stoves. Make sure you clean that carefully, not leaving any chametz around that might be stuck there. Then, of course, general household areas, okay? Living room, to vacuum your chairs and your cushions, and check under beds and in closets and in your storage facilities. Not every storage facility needs to be checked. Only places that you bring chametz into need to be checked. What about shelters? Do shelters need to be checked? Yes, because you go down to the shelter in the middle of the meal, into your mamad or your shelter, so you're liable to bring chametz with you. In fact, just today, I was in a certain shelter, and somebody came in with their chocolate chip cookies. And I remembered, okay, good, right? Shelters need to be checked. People come in there with their cookies or with whatever they're holding at the time. So shelters need to be checked. Children's rooms, playrooms, toy boxes, doll houses, toys, clothes, toy boxes. We said toy boxes. Clothing. Check your pockets. So often, right, I get questions of chametz found on Pesach in pockets. Okay, one takes out a coat. The coat has a pocket, And I don't know, a few months ago we left some cookie an Oreos, who knows what, something in a coat pocket, rucksacks, backpacks. All of these things need to be checked, need to be cleaned. Bookshelves, books. Okay, books. One doesn't have to check books, but if one brings books to the table, then one has to be careful on Pesach not to bring the same book to the table. I'm not worried about the tiny crumbs that are in the book. Some are worried. The Chazon Ish was worried about it. Generally speaking, we're not particular about the teeny tiny crumbs in our books, but sometimes we bring them to the table, right? If we bring them during the year, we might bring them on Pesach too. So beware, right? Benches, generally speaking, use separate benches for Pesach. Don't use your year-long benches because they're full of crumbs, unless you want to go through the benches page by page and sift out anything that might be there. Recommendation: use special benches for Pesach. Vacuum cleaning, I don't know, is it a problem? The minig is replace the bag. You might have all kinds of stuff there. There might be some cookie in the vacuum cleaning bag. I don't know. School bags, right? Kids' school bag, handbags, purses, stuff like that. Cars, right? One has to clean out the car, under the seats, move them back and forth, reach the crevices. Stuff falls in under seats. That's not called nafal alav mapoile. Something that's behind your fridge. I recommend cleaning behind your fridge, but that's not a halachic recommendation. That's a kind of a year-long hygiene recommendation. One doesn't actually have to search under the fridge because that's nafal alav mapoiles. That's inaccessible. One cannot reach something, a soup nut under your fridge on Pesach. But that's not true for things that are under the car seats, and therefore those have to be checked. The compartments, the glove compartments, the console, I don't know how you call them, the side pockets on the doors, right? The trunk area of the car. All of these need to be checked. These are notorious for harboring your Cheerios. So beware. Office, right? Drawers. You have to clean out your drawers. Who knows what you might have put them, right? Your Some shake out the crumbs from your keyboards. Does one have to shake out the crumbs? I don't know if that's a chiyuv, but I think it's a recommendation. Shake out the crumbs. Why not? I'm saying you're not going to eat the crumbs in your keyboard, but I don't think they're going to reach a kazais. But nevertheless, there's often a lot of crumbs, more than you expect. Briefcases, work bags, lockers, I don't know, right? All of these things need to be checked. Your garage or your shed, if you store there, or if people go there during the meal, and so on. Okay, so all of this needs to be checked. What doesn't need cleaning? So, generally speaking, a bathroom. Well, if you have kids, then every place needs to be checked. But bathrooms, you don't bring chametz there. Maybe there's chewable medicines. Maybe there's something that's considered food, but generally speaking, that's not a chametz area. Inaccessible areas don't need to be, taken apart. Heavy furniture, heavy appliances that are never moved. Rooms where food is never taken. Certain closets, certain bathrooms. Areas that are being sold. If you're doing a Yud Gimel Mechira, if you're selling, closing off a room, you're not going to be using it over Pesach, then that's a room that doesn't have to be cleaned and checked. So that is introductory. Okay, cleaning for Pesach, getting rid of anything that's chametz. Now let's move. Yes, any questions? If anyone has questions just on that, please unmute yourselves. Yes.
Can you just clarify? You said if you have kids, did you say you have to clean everywhere or just check everywhere?
No, clean everywhere. If you have kids who are likely to transport their cookies and their Cheerios and their soup nuts or whatever into all kinds of places, so places that are accessible to kids, low drawers, right? Toy drawers, the low areas of closets.
What if you
Okay,
have an understanding that they don't take food there? Can you trust that? Or you're saying you can't really trust that because they're kids?
well, understanding is a quote unquote understanding. Maybe it's your understanding, but maybe it's not your children's understanding. Meaning, the pasuk says well, it's not exactly the quote for this shir, but Yodea Tzadik Nefesh Behemto. You have to know your kids, right? If your kids are running around the house with food everywhere, then the low areas, right, low hanging areas where children are likely or plausible where they might place chametz items, then yeah, then those should be checked. But you know, follow around your kids a little bit, see where they might put stuff. It doesn't have to be will they climb up a ladder and put something on a on a top drawer or something, right? That's unlikely. But areas that are low and where they might put stuff, then yes, those areas do need to be checked for chametz. Let's move on to kashering. Okay, so kashering is something that most of us will be engaged with. Some have the privilege of having these Pesach kitchens, a separate set of pots and pans and cutlery and everything for Pesach, and that's great. If you have that, then you don't need to kasher any of those kinds of utensils. And nevertheless, most people don't have a Pesach coffee machine. Most people don't have, a Pesach urn. Some people do have Pesach urns. And therefore, these are questions. To what degree and how can you kasher all of these different items? So let's go one by one. First of all, and one of the most common, is a stovetop, right? Kashering stovetops. So many of the stovetops that we have, gas stovetops, are made of iron, metal, stainless steel. So many kasher them by cleaning thoroughly, waiting 24 hours, lechatchila, and then meaning 24 hours from the last use with chametz. Okay, generally speaking, we don't spill chametz on our grates, on our stovetops. But let's say, so you wait 24 hours, and then you turn the burners onto the highest setting for a few minutes. Let's say for 10 minutes. And that itself is a libun. It's not libun chomer maybe, but it's a degree of libun. Even after that, there are many who cover the grates. And that's based on the Ramah, who writes that the chatzuva, that grates require libun. However, this is, like the Mishnah Berurah already mentioned, this is a very particular chumrah of the Ramah. And mi'ikar adin, it's enough just to do hagala on the chatzuva, on the grates, meaning to immerse them. Certainly the Sephardi custom is just to do hagala, or even just to pour boiling water on the grates. That's also sufficient. And in the Ashkenazi custom, so again, many cover them with this heavy duty aluminum foil. I would say that it's a Ashkenazi custom that we've done for many generations, and one should do that if that's possible. If for some reason that's inconvenient or difficult, then it's enough to do hagala, or it's enough to just turn on the fire, the burners on the highest setting for 10 minutes, and that's also good enough. Like I said, the Ashkenazi custom is to go the extra mile on the chatzuva, on the grates. Most people today have electric or glass stovetops, and those are easier to kasher. Those are kasherable by pouring boiling water onto the glass stovetop. Because even though we're machmir, or the Ashkenazi custom is machmir that glass does not have a plausible, is not kasherable. However, that's because glass breaks, and stovetops don't break, and therefore stovetops are eminently kasherable by pouring boiling water from your urn, from your kettle, onto your glass stovetop, and then it can be used on Pesach in the regular way. I know that some are machmir on this too, but I don't see a reason to be machmir on this. And electric and glass stovetops, induction stovetops, they can be kashered by pouring boiling water from an urn or from a kettle onto your stovetops. Ovens can be kashered by cleaning thoroughly. Okay, I know we all clean our ovens, but it doesn't have to go crazy. I know some people use the very caustic, toxic cleaning agents, St. Moritz and so on. And maybe that's a kind of minig Israel that we do that. Even without using them, one can clean an oven. Don't have to use those kinds of cleaning agent, but they're helpful. They're helpful to get the grease out. They're helpful to get the difficult stains out. One doesn't have to clean the oven from stains. Stains are not chametz. You have to clean it from anything that might be there, some substance that might be there. Having cleaned the oven thoroughly, one has to run it at the highest temperature for an hour or so, and that's sufficient for cleaning and for kashering the oven. And the racks should be cleaned and kashered together with the oven. Of course, if you have a self-cleaning oven, then that's wonderful. Self-cleaning ovens are the best for Pesach because you do a self-cleaning cycle and that kashers your oven. Oven trays that are used directly with chametz, meaning let's say you use the oven tray for dough, you just place dough on the oven tray, are not recommended for Pesach because they would need libun, proper libun, and regular ovens don't get to the temperature that constitutes proper libun. And therefore for oven trays, again, if you're using them directly with dough during the year, with bread during the year, those are not recommended for Pesach. Most of us don't put things directly on the oven tray, but again, those who do, then that's not recommended for Pesach use. Even though there's a machlokes, do you say kabolo kach polto, right? The principle for kashering is that the same way that you used it, that's also how you extract anything that was nivla, absorbed into it. But some hold that for things that are used directly with chametz, one has to use full libun, which is a higher temperature at 4 or 450 degrees Celsius, and regular ovens don't reach those temperatures. For countertops, if you have non-porous materials, most of modern countertops that are non-porous, they're not cracked, they don't absorb, right? Granite, formica, corian, all of these kinds of materials, they can be kashered by pouring boiling water onto your countertops from an urn or from a kettle. However, you do have to make sure that the boiling water reaches all of the different parts of the countertop. The thing is, once you pour the boiling water, it spreads out. And once it spreads out, it gets cold. So sometimes you'll have to do several kind of pourings of this boiling water onto your countertop in order to ensure that the countertop gets hit with boiling water in all of its places. Now, what does all of its places mean? Okay, we're not talking about millimeters. We're talking about to the naked eye, right? It seems to our naked eye that we've covered the countertop with pouring boiling water. But from my experience, you'll have to dry, right? You have to do it and then to clear off the water and then to dry the countertop and then to do it again in areas that were not hit with the boiling water the first time. And that's sufficient. Some, especially with the old types of countertops that were much more absorptive, they were very cracked and not really kasherable. So the minig used to be to cover the countertops with aluminum foil or with PVC, and then they used to get very smelly over Pesach. And nowadays our countertops are eminently kasherable, and therefore one doesn't have to cover them. Some find it difficult not to cover countertops because it doesn't look like Pesach thick enough. If your kitchen doesn't look like a spaceship, like it's all like covered with aluminum foil, then it's not Pesach thick. Tamar, my wife, has managed to get over that, and therefore we don't cover everything anymore, but we did used to. Our new home has the more modern countertops that are non-porous, and therefore they don't have to be covered. They can be kashered. Sinks. So if you have stainless steel sinks, that's wonderful. You clean it, you kasher it with pouring boiling water onto your stainless steel sink, and as we say in English, Bob's your uncle. That's wonderful if you have stainless steel. If you have sinks that are not stainless steel, but rather they're enamel or porcelain and so on, so those cannot be kashered formally, and nevertheless, I would recommend, and I know the general minig or one way of doing it is to use an insert. You can use an insert for your sink. Another way to do it is to kasher the sink, meaning to clean it, to pour boiling water over your sink, and then to use it over Pesach with cold water. Rather than using it with hot water, use it with cold or with lukewarm water, and then you don't have a problem of blios, and then you can use your sink regularly, and you don't have to. The inserts are sometimes problematic because they get clogged and then everything starts coming up. And even halachically, that's not so great because who knows what's getting mixed up down there. Rather, if you just kasher the sink and then don't use it for hot water, respecting the fact that porcelain cannot be kashered, rather you only use it with cold or lukewarm water, and then you're able to use the sink over Pesach, even though it's not a stainless steel sink. Pots and pans, if you want to do hagala on your pots and your pans, right? Metal, stainless steel, cutlery, silverware, your bechers, your kiddush cups. Okay, so then they need to be cleaned. Sometimes you have to remove handles to clean underneath handles. Nowadays less, but this used to be the case. Again, if they've been used for chametz, you have to wait your 24 hours, and then you submerge in a large pot of boiling water, bubbling, boiling water. That's hagala. Hagala doesn't need to be the entire utensil at the same time. If it's too big, you can do it bit by bit. One half first, you submerge, immerse one half, and then the other half. You can do it bit by bit. That works for hagala too. If the utensil is too big for hagala, for example, in Hebrew they call it a chipsa, one of these chip things. Anyway, if it can't be submerged, then the other way of doing hagala is to fill it up with boiling water, to boil the water inside the utensil, and then to add more boiling water from an external source, from a kettle, from an urn, so that the boiling water pours over. It overflows over the rim of the utensil, and that is also an effective way of hagala if you're unable to immerse it. The same thing applies for cutlery, of course. For spoons, you have to clean and then immerse in a pot of boiling water. What about other appliances? So I get asked often, dishwashers. Can one kasher a dishwasher for Pesach? And the answer is yes. Dishwashers are kasherable for Pesach. One has to clean the dishwasher, to clean the filter, the filter area of the dishwasher, and then again it's a chumrah in case there's any chametz there. Be'ein, unlikely, but still one should do that just to make sure, and then to run an empty cycle of the dishwasher, and that will kasher the dishwasher. Some are concerned about the plastic parts of the dishwasher because we're not sure about the status of plastic. Can it be kashered or not? But I'm less concerned about this for dishwashers because we use our dishwashers with detergent, with soap. So you never have real belios. It's always pogum, right? You're always using it with soap. So there's never taste that's actually being absorbed in a halachic sense in the dishwasher parts. And therefore, I am confident that there's no problem to kasher your dishwashers and then to use them over Pesach. Coffee machines. So coffee machines that are used for coffee alone do not need to be kashered if the coffee is unflavored. If the coffee is flavored coffee, and it might contain kitnios, usually the concern for flavored coffee is kitnios, so then the way to kasher the machine would be to run an empty cycle. Okay, you wait 24 hours after the last use, and then you run an empty cycle of the coffee machine, and that will kasher the internal parts of the coffee machine. If there's a bowl there which is detachable and is washed or used in a chametz environment, then one can do hagala on the bowl or on the utensil, whatever it is, and to kasher that via hagala for the coffee machine. Microwaves. So microwaves can be kashered for Pesach. Some set them aside and don't use your microwave on Pesach. I think it's okay to use your microwave over Pesach. The way to kasher it is to clean it thoroughly and then to place a cup of water inside the microwave and to leave your microwave on for 10 minutes on the highest setting, more or less, until the microwave is filled with steam, and that caches the walls of the microwave. The plate itself, if the plate is used for chametz, then of course the plate should not be used, but rather should be covered. One should cover the plate with a double wrap, cover the plate thoroughly, and ensure that the Pesach dishes or the Pesach foods shouldn't touch the plate. The glass plate cannot be kashered. Based on Ashkenazi custom, based on Sephardi custom, it doesn't need kashering, but one should cover the plate, and then the microwave itself can be used. Toasters, toaster ovens, I would not even think of kashering my toaster or toaster oven for Pesach. It's too complicated. That will need full libun, and that's not going to work for Pesach purposes. So toaster ovens and toasters should be cleaned for chametz, for crumbs, and then they should be set aside until after Pesach. I think that covers my list of kashering. Any questions on that section?
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Of course, I'm inviting questions.
I wrote some in the chat, so I wasn't okay.
Oh, sorry, I haven't been following the chat. In fact,
It's okay.
1 second. Oh, I do see questions in the chat. Hold on. Sorry. So first of all, let me address some of these questions in the chat before we get to the final section. So raw oats. Instant oats are chametz. Instant oat meal is chametz and must be discarded on Pesach. Why? Because it's already been cooked and prepared. Raw oats are not chametz. They may have been washed on some level, and therefore they shouldn't be used on Pesach, of course. But they can be set aside and they can be included in one's Pesach sale. They're not chametz. The same applies, for example, for barley, right? Raw barley, what they call in English pearl barley, for example. It might have been treated in some way to give it its shine, okay? But still, it's not chametz. It hasn't been cooked. It shouldn't be used on Pesach, right? We don't want to use barley on Pesach. It can become chametz, of course, and therefore it should be set aside for the duration of Pesach, and if one wants, one can include it in the sale. Let me just see a few more of these. Cottonseed oil. So we'll get to that when we speak about the shopping. Wait for it. Mouthwash. One can use the same mouthwash as during the year. One doesn't use mouthwash when one has bread in one's mouth. I don't think that's something that we need to be concerned about. Little children can bring things into the miklat. That's why the miklat needs to be checked. Absolutely. Your Haggadah has Birchas Hamazon. Thank you, Ronnie. Good point. Yes, you can leave your grates in a self-clean oven, but they can be damaged. One has to be careful. Grates in a self-clean oven is an ideal way of kashering grates. However, from experience, the coating on the grates can be melted by the high temperatures of the self-clean oven. Is quinoa kitnios? That is a subject of great dispute. Let's talk about it in the shopping section. Would aluminum foil be enough without libun on the grates? Well, yes, aluminum foil will be enough. Generally speaking, we do some level of kashering because we're concerned that the aluminum foil will be torn. However, if you use a thick aluminum foil, from my experience, it doesn't get torn over Pesach. You just have to use this, I don't know what they call it. They call it, they didn't call it thick, they call it something else. But the very thick and strong aluminum foil is excellent. And then
No, I was going to ask if the aluminum foil it does end up opening, unfortunately, during Pesach. Bidi Evid, are the kalim still kosher or no?
yes, the kelim are kosher, and the reason for that is because like the Mishnah Berurah comments, on the Ramah says that we're machmir on our grades. The Mishnah Berurah says, hey, one kli doesn't absorb from another kli. If everything's dry, you don't have any problems and everything stays good. Even if it's wet, it still isn't a problem because, of course, it's all pogrom. It's a long time after you've used it with chametz, and therefore everything stays good. So you can, if you're covering, then you don't need to worry too much about the kashering. You cover it, and then you're good. And to the question of Ariella Levy, might be somebody else there, but yes, you clean the counter. You don't. The waiting 24 hours is after using it for hot chametz. Generally speaking, we don't use our counters for hot chametz, and therefore one doesn't really have to wait this 24-hour. It's your standard procedure. But if you haven't used it recently for hot chametz, then you can do it all together. One doesn't have to wait the whole time. Okay, water urns or electric hot plates. Thank you. I did miss those. So the electric hot plate, because one often puts chametz directly onto the electric hot plate, or do we? Many people do. I would recommend cleaning it thoroughly. You can kasher it by leaving it on for a while, but I would still cover it because it's very easy and convenient to cover electric hot plates. I would cover them with your aluminum foil. It doesn't even have to be your thick and strong. A couple of layers of regular aluminum foil. I would cover the electric hot plate, and that will ensure you don't have any issues with your electric hot plate. Do urns need to be kashered? Generally speaking, water urns, hot water urns, don't require kashering because you don't use them for chametz. You use them only for dispensing water. And even if you use them for dispensing water onto a chametz cup, nevertheless, that doesn't make them chametz, and therefore they don't need special kashering. The time when you do need kashering is if you place your chalos on top of your urns in order to heat them for your Shabbos meals, and then one would have to do hagala for the lid of the urn, and one could do hagala by inserting it into a pot of boiling water. Like I mentioned before, if it's too large, one can divide it and do it half by half. First one half, and then the other half, and that's certainly sufficient for the lids of your urns. If one is concerned, if the urn is placed close to your stovetops, and one is worried about potential spillages and so on, then one can kasher the urn also by boiling it up till the top and adding some more boiling water, and then once it spills over, the whole thing is kashered for Pesach. Generally speaking, that wouldn't be necessary, but if one is concerned and one wishes to kasher the urn, then the urn is also kasherable. It is important to wash the area of the spout and so on, and the same applies for your faucets, right? To wash the faucet, and one can kasher faucets by pouring boiling water on the faucet. Some are also concerned to kasher the internal size of the faucet by leaving it on the hottest setting of hot water to open the faucet and then to pour water on top. These are chumras. We like chumras on Pesach, but within reason. Let's move on to shopping. If we're happy with kashering, I know it's very focused, but this is a focused chair. Can you cover your baking tray? That's also a shelf with tin foil after cleaving it, leaving it in the oven. What are you going to use your baking tray for on Pesach? What is a baking tray?
Yeah, I have those too, the shelves.
Yeah, it's a shelf. It's an oven tray.
This is it's an oven tray which is used for keeping things warm, right?
No. For cooking.
Oh, it's used
like
for
instead
cooking.
of one of my shelves is wire, and the other one is like a flat tray. It's a
Like
pan,
a cookie sheet.
Okay.
but
Okay.
it fits into the oven, and I usually use it with baking paper, and then I roast vegetables on it, or I bake cookies on it.
Yeah, so that's fine. kasher the tray by leaving it in the oven when you kasher the oven. The hottest setting for, they often say an hour, I think half an hour is also sufficient for 30 minutes at the hottest setting. And then you're using it also in Pesach with baking paper. So essentially you're okay. But still kasher the tray by going through the process. Leave it in the oven when you kasher the oven. Hottest setting, half an hour, a half hour. And then you can carry on using it on Pesach with your baking paper. That's fine. Is it necessary to pour cold water after crashing with hot water? It's a chumrah that some do. It's not really necessary, no. But some do it. And you'll see on the process of kashering, they often noted that there is a reason for that chumrah, and if you want, you can do it for sure. What if there are lots of spills on that tray? Yes, there will be spills, but spills is like irui, right? Something that spills. It's like an irui kli rishon. That is not the type of baking that is considered roasting, and that will require libun, and therefore the spilling is why we need to kasher it. But that's sufficient for the spilling. One doesn't need to go beyond that level of kashering for trays that are not used directly with chametz. Okay, let's move on to shopping. Okay, so a few tips on shopping and on different products, and some of these products were already mentioned in the chat in questions. So my first advice on shopping is early shopping. Don't wait till the last minute. The earlier you go shopping, the less halachic mistakes can happen. It's not just a logistical thing. When you're rushed, then you stop checking labels and standards and so on. And if you go shopping earlier, you'll have more time, you'll be less pressured, and you can be more exacting in terms of what you buy. And by the way, you can also, sometimes if you go late, you'll be more machmir because you won't have time to check everything. And then they say, oh, I'm just going to buy the things with the most like machmir hechsher because I don't have time to check anything. If you go shopping earlier, you can be more discerning and you'll be able to buy better stuff. So go shopping early. Don't leave the shopping till the last minute. Alcoholic beverages, they need special attention. Okay, whiskey is chametz. There are whiskeys that are made from, I don't remember what it is. There's like Pesach whiskey. But generally speaking, right, whiskey is classic chametz. Most liqueurs will also be problematic, will be chametz. Almost all liqueurs are chametz. Vodka, right, is often chametz, but not always, right? Beer alternatives, extracts, all kinds of alcoholic products. Be careful with them, okay? They need attention. They're often problematic, but not always. So pay attention to them. I mentioned already pet food. Pet food can be a real Pesach issue, so check them. Often, fish food is often not a problem because it's gross. It's like, it's nifsa machilas kelev. And therefore fish food is often not a problem, but other kinds of pet foods is often problematic, so be careful. Spices, okay, ground spices, they can contain anti-caking agents. They can contain chametz or Pesach complications. So even though they look innocent, check them. They need to be checked. A word on matzah meal, okay? We're sometimes so machmir on our matzahs to get the best hechsherim because it's matzah, right? Matzah can become chametz. We want like a good hechsher for our matzah. Fair enough. But then matzah meal, we just buy any matzah meal in the supermarket. Matzah meal and matzah is the same issue. Matzah meal is made from matzot. So if you're being machmir on your matzahs, be machmir also on your matzah meal. It's the same thing, right? Some people say, no, my matzah is only like, I don't know, chabura matzahs. But matzah meal, they'll eat any old matzah meal, but it's the same. Okay, so if you're buying matzah meal, be discerning, right? It's the same as matzot. Just like we want a good hechsher on our matzahs, we also want a good hechsher on our matzah meal. And if we're talking about matzahs, then hand matzah, I would say, requires an even better hechsher than machine matzah. Because hand matzah, the level of michsholim right? The level of issues and problems that can happen when you're doing things by hand. It's not an automated process. It's not a standardized process, but rather you're doing things by hand. You can have a lot of issues there. And therefore, hand matzah, I would really make sure there's a good hechsher. I have a privilege of baking my own hand matzah before Pesach, which is wonderful. If one wants to avoid chametz, I often tell people sometimes machine matzah is a more secure way of avoiding it than hand matzah, because everything is more automated, everything is more simple when you have machine matzahs, even though the original discussion of hand versus machine, Rav Shlomo Kluger and Rav Nossenson, Shalom Meshev, this is going back more than a century, significantly more than a century, in fact. So they spoke about potential problems. By the way, the main problems were this is going to take away parnasa from the bakers, right? Because all these poor bakers are not going to have parnasa because we're going to use machine matzahs, and people were worried about the shape. We're used to round matzahs. What are these square matzahs? That's not traditional, and other such issues. But there were also issues that the corners might build up and so on, and it's harder to remove the machine matzahs. I don't know, all kinds of things. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, our machine matzahs are excellent. What about kitnios shopping? Okay, kitnios. So Diet Coke. Diet Coke is not a problem. Now, you'll see on Diet Coke that sometimes it will say on them that it's le'ochle kitnios bilvad. However, that's because they're worried about the artificial sweetener, which might be of kitnios origin. That origin is very far removed from the final product. We call this kitnios shenishtanu. There's no reason to be machmir for that. We want to be machmir on chametz. We don't want to be machmir on kitnios. Rav Moshe writes, any kind of safek kitnios is mutter. We don't want to be machmir on kitnios, and therefore diet cola is fine. What about quinoa? So I know that some are machmir for quinoa under the argument of, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it's a duck, and quinoa kind of looks kitnios like. However, I'm very sympathetic. I'm to the makel argument, such as the one made by Rav Moshe, that this wasn't around at the time when we decreed when the custom of kitnios took effect. So quinoa certainly wasn't around. Moreover, quinoa isn't a bean or a legume. It's a type of grass. It's different in kind. And moreover, we don't have a lot of variety of what we can eat on Pesach. And therefore, I am sympathetic to the argument that quinoa is not prohibited under the kitnios rubric. Now, another point to make on kitnios, in fact, 2 points to make. First of all, kitnios without water, as the Trumas Hadeshen rules, and this is ruled by many poskim, Masham, Shulchan Aruch Harav, Chaye Adam, and others. Kitnios that didn't come into contact with water are not considered kitnios for Pesach purposes, just like chametz, right? Wheat that didn't come into contact with water is not a problem on Pesach. Our matzos are made of wheat, and the same thing should surely be true for kitnios. If they don't come into contact with water, then it's not a problem. And that's why one can be lenient, even though some are machmir for this, but nevertheless, one can be lenient for kitnios that haven't come into contact with water. For example, what are examples of kitnios that didn't come into contact with water? Popcorn. Now, wouldn't it be weird to be eating popcorn on Pesach? But it's okay. Kitnios that didn't come into contact with water are not a problem on Pesach. And therefore, now Rice Krispies are generally a problem because the rice is treated with water in the process of making the Rice Krispies, and therefore those would generally be a problem. But kitnios that didn't come into contact with water are not a problem, and you can shop for those on Pesach. They need to be kosher lePesach. Okay, one mustn't forget that even kitnios that are permitted need a hechsher for kitnios that are permitted. Even things that we don't classify as kitnios, but they need a hechsher for Pesach. Another very important point on kitnios is that kitnios, according to the Trumas tradition, this is ruled by the Ramah in Simon Taf Nun Gimel, right? The Ramah rules that when kitnios, unlike chametz, even a crumb renders the entire mixture prohibited, but kitnios, if you have 49% of a mixture, the mixture is permitted, right? This is based on, as I mentioned, Trumas Tradition, and unlike other opinions, I think Maharil argues on this, but the Ramah paskins that it's mutter, and this is what the Acharonim write. The Chuk Yaakov, if I remember correctly, and Chai Adam, and Aruch HaShulchan, and the Mishnah Berurah, meaning we are allowed to eat kitnios that are batal, that were nullified in a 20%, 30%, 40% mixture with other foods. Now, one isn't allowed to nullify lechatchila, but buying in a store isn't considered nullifying lechatchila. And therefore, you'll have all kinds of foods in your stores that will say le'ochlei kitniot because they have some kitnios content. And nevertheless, they're permitted even for Ashkenazim because a minority of kitnios is batal, is nullified in a majority of kitnios. Now, an example, ice cream. I don't know, right? Ice cream might have some kitnios content. It might have liftit, which is canola, kind of canola oil. If we're talking about it and somebody asks cottonseed oil, so the minig was always in America to be makel for cottonseed oil, and the same will apply to canola because it's very similar. In Israel, most Israelis are machmir for canola and for cottonseed oil, but those who find that inconvenient and for Pesach, it's hard to find good oils for Pesach. Some of the kosher Pesach oils are not your preferred oils, and I don't think there's a problem to be makel also for canola oil. Canola oil is not made from a bean, it's made from a type of flour, it's not edible, and those were the rationales for being makel for cottonseed oil, and the same will apply to canola oil also. And there's plenty of kosher Pesach canola oil available. Going back to the original point that I wanted to make, many foods that will say le'ochle kitnios will be permitted also for Ashkenazim based on the idea of bittul. However, one has to be discerning. Sometimes this will be a product which is a kitnios product. The Shulchan Aruch Harav writes that if the main part, this is actually in Taf Samach base, I think. It's not exactly in the same place, but he writes that if the main product, if it's a kitnios product, and even if it's minority, but this is the kitnios product, it's a rice product, even if the rice is only 30%, but this is a rice product, then you won't be allowed to eat it, even if it's not the majority. But if it's a non-kitnios product, okay, it's a pepper salad, and the pepper salad, it says le'ochle kitnios, and why? Because it has some oil that is a soya oil, which oils were a big controversy. The minig is to be machmir on soya oil. But if that's a minority ingredient and you're eating the peppers, then that would be permitted even for the Ashkenazi custom based on the halacha that I mentioned, that it's batal b'roiv. What about peanuts? So peanuts is a question. Are peanuts considered to be kitnios or not? Many, I would say, in Israel have the minig to be machmer on this. The general minig in America is to be makel on this, and one can be noyeg based on his or her minig concerning peanuts. It's a question if this is considered a legume, or it doesn't really look like one. But some are machmer here in Israel on this. Fresh corn on the cob would be fine if you don't boil it. Yeah, fresh corn on the cob. Well, usually it's cooked. Oh, if you don't cook it. Yeah, that would be okay if you don't cook it. I've never tried it when it's not cooked. But I think so, yes. Okay, I think that's more or less what I wanted to cover in my shopping section. Any questions on that?
Yep, I have another question. Thank you,
Yes.
Rabbi. So the days and weeks leading up to Pesach, all the dairy products and the eggs have the Kasher Pesach stamp, like with the expiry date
Yes.
on them. If
Yes.
I have sealed dairy products from before that time, it's permissible for on Pesach
Does it say kosher Pesach on them or not?
without that stamp that's
It
sealed.
doesn't say kosher Pesach on it.
Like for cream cheese, milk, eggs.
I'm saying you have a hard time, meaning everything that's available now is already kosher Pesach. How long are you keeping this milk for?
So my question is, what makes it chametz if it doesn't have the stamp?
Nothing makes it chametz. Eggs are not chametz, and milk is not chametz. And nevertheless, it's stamped kosher Pesach because there's a special hakpada on the lines. There's a special hakpada to ensure that the workers don't bring their chametz and so on.
Okay, understood.
But eggs are not chametz, and if you have an egg from before, from a month before Pesach, and it looks good and clean and everything's okay with it, you can use your egg on Pesach. Basic ingredients, and perhaps somebody asked this on a chat, basic ingredients, pure sugar, pure coffee, eggs, theoretically, they do not require any kosher Pesach label. Nevertheless, they are often labeled kosher Pesach, and we like that. It's an extra precaution. I should mention also that one doesn't really have to buy, kosher Pesach cleaning agents. Okay, I know that everything now comes with kosher Pesach labels, but it's not required. One doesn't even, dishwashing liquid doesn't have to be kosher Pesach. Toothpaste doesn't have to be kosher Pesach. And Rav Moshe Feinstein writes, if they make it kosher Pesach, then buy the kosher Pesach one, but it doesn't really need to be kosher Pesach because toothpaste isn't food. Perfumes, one is allowed to use perfume on Pesach. One doesn't have to worry about the alcohol. It's not food. It's not an issue. The same applies to creams and lotions and deodorants. One doesn't have to get kosher Pesach deodorant. If it's available and one wants to contribute money to the Erliche Yid who's making kosher Pesach deodorant, then good. It's fine to buy kosher Pesach deodorant, but one doesn't have to. It's not chametz. It's not food. One doesn't need to have kosher Pesach deodorant. So all of these types of products, that there's a trend out there to have everything kosher Pesach. It's a silsul, I would call it. It's it's something sweet, but it's not. This doesn't enter the realm of halacha.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if I may I raise an issue concerning the comparison between cottonseed oil and canola oil.
Yes.
Cottonseed oil, as my understanding in America, the heter that was used to take it out of the concept of kitniot is that nothing has ever been made of cotton seeds which resembles in any way any kind of chametz, any kind of flour. Cotton seeds are not used for anything edible. Canola seed, a rape seed, which is what canola is made from,
Rapeseed, yes.
has in fact been used. It has always been used for animal feed, and it is also used now for enhancing breads in some way, adding fiber of some sort to breads. So I'm not so sure about the comparison.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that, and I think that perhaps a distinction can be made based on what you're suggesting. At the same time, canola is not a food, meaning one doesn't. You're right. You can use it in the food industry in one way or another, but it's still very much divorced. It's very separate from your soya beans. It's very separate. Now, don't forget that oils themselves are a tremendous machlokes among poskim, whether we're concerned about kitnius oils or not. And the minhag for that is to be machmir. But the disposition here would be to say, havu de loisef Allah, meaning it's enough that we're machmir for the real beans, like soya and corn and so on. We're machmir for those oils. But when it comes to things like rapeseed, cottonseed, you're right, one can make a distinction, but it's a subtle one. And at the end of the day, the canola flour, again, you can extract something there from that rapeseed and do something with it, but it's not something that you'll find on your plate. Meaning, if you understand what I mean, this is not your corn or your soya and so on. And therefore, I nevertheless think that they are uh, that they are very similar. And if we're makel on the cottonseed, then we can also be makel on the canola. And I do concede that many are not. That many are not makel on canola, and many do not use canola oil on Pesach. My disposition with anything related to kidneys is that we're not looking to be machmir for kidneys. We want to be machmir for chametz. We want to find chumras of chametz. We're not looking for chumras of kidneys.
Rabbi Pfeffer?
Yes.
Um, can you elaborate what you said about hechsherim on matzah? Because I already purchased matzah and I
Yes.
wasn't so makbid. If you could say what's not okay, maybe on mashimi
Well,
matzah.
I don't want to speak publicly right now about different hechsherim. It's not my favorite topic, but I'll be happy to speak to you privately about matzah. Matzah generally, because it's made of wheat and because it can become chametz, then we do look for good hechsherim for our matzot. But speak to me privately about which ones exactly. It's not, like I said, not my favorite topic. Certainly not publicly.
Rav Pfeffer?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to kosher my kitchen early and feed my children rice after I have a kosher Pesach kitchen. Is there any way to do that?
I mean, yes, you could use you could kasher a year-long pot and use that year-long pot for rice and then put it away before Pesach. And then you're giving your kids rice. You're going to give them rice 3 times a day. Good luck with that. But you can kasher a pot, which is not difficult, do hagala, do a simple hagala by, filling it up to the top and allowing the water to overflow. Do a simple hagala of a pot, of a year-long pot. Use that in your Pesach kitchen and use that for rice and then put that away before Pesach and then you're good. That would be a
And you
simple way
don't
of doing it.
have to like many Sfardim like chuck the rice to like 3 times and wash it. You don't have to do that. You can just buy like kosher Pesach rice and give it.
Kosher Pesach rice is good. Absolutely.
Could I have or I don't know if anyone else is raising their hand or.
Sure.
Okay, so this is something I've kind of struggled with. So the rabbi mentioned that, like, for example, lipstick doesn't need a heksher. I mean, it's not lemaisa to me, but I remember the idea is that I understood, if I please correct me if I'm wrong, that we're more machmir on things that enter the mouth than we are with, let's say, cosmetics and oils. Based, I think, on a Gemara that if you burn it to a point that it's not even ru'ui lechila, but the person eats it anyways, it's still usher. We still usher it because it's I forgot the term nechshev.
The term is achshave. But
Achshave, right.
achshave requires a conscious act of eating. And even if you inadvertently eat some of your lipstick, that is not considered achshave. So you're right. There are some who are careful of this and who are machmir, and it's limitless. The churmas for Pesach are boundless. But lipstick is not food, and if some of it gets in your mouth and you swallow it, that's not achshave, and therefore this doesn't become the sugya of achshave will not apply to lipstick. And nevertheless, you're right. You can find your kosher Pesach lipstick, and perhaps Rav Moshe would have said about that also that once it's available, then matov, why not use your kosher Pesach lipstick? But halachically, there's no need to worry about the lipstick.
So now back to more that's lemaisa to me, that I have these creams, ointments. I have very dry skin. I do have to moisturize a lot. But when you wash it with water, it doesn't exactly get it off. It gets a little greasy, and it's likely to get onto the matzah or the food that I'm touching with my hands. And I'm going to eat the food. I don't want it to be on the matzah. I don't want it. I mean, and I don't think it's re'ui lechilas kelev.
It is not. Ointment is not roy lechilas kelev. It's not food. But you're worried that maybe you'll eat it and you'll eat it consciously. You won't be eating it consciously. If you'll see cream on your matzah, you'll get rid of the cream, surely.
No, but it's my hands are greasy, let's say, and like you're touching the matzah. And
First of all, interesting question. Even under such conditions, I would not consider this to be a case of achshave in any sense. This is not food. You don't want to eat it. In fact, it's the last thing you want to eat is your hand cream. If you'll see it on your matter, you'll take it off. So your hands are greasy, but this is not a case of actually. I would not be concerned for this.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Good. Thank you, everyone. Was there another question there?
I hate to beat a dead horse,
Yes.
but just back to canola oil. The Rav said
Back to canola oil. Yes.
we could buy kosher Pesach canola oil. From what I have seen, the only hechsher on canola oil that I've seen around has been that of Rabbi Yosef, and he says that it's lochli kidniyat bevad.
Yes.
So that's a very interesting. It doesn't matter to him, but
he has to. They have to put that on. They put lochli kidniyos on anything. They put lochli kidniyos bilvad on diet cola. They put lochli kidniyos bilvad on anything that has a trace of kidneyos. It's not it's a social statement rather than a halachic statement. I would not, and you're right. You're relying on Rav Yosef's hechsher that it doesn't have chametz. But you know what? Canola oil, generally speaking, is not a suspect product of having chametz, and therefore the fact that it says on the bottle of kidneys, this is not what we need to be concerned of. They want to be okay with everyone. They don't want to get anyone upset, right? So they write on any trace kidneys, that's automatically written on the label.
thank you.
Very good. Let's leave it for there then. Very good. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you
And,
so much.
we should
Can
all
also,
have
I don't know, just
yes.
just not related. I mean, maybe the rabbi could give a halacha chabura on the Leil Seder, on like what's a kazais, revis, when to lean, things.
Oh, here we go.
Just a question.
Or write an essay and send it to us.
Or something like that.
Rabbi Pfeffer, it's
Yes.
Yisachar. Could I ask a follow-up question to my wife about the oven tray that had baking paper under the cookies? It's not waterproof or impervious like aluminum foil. And when you bake cookies, grease soaks through and you can see it on the oven tray after
Yes,
you
but
remove the cookies and the
you're
paper.
right, Yisachar, you're right, but it's only a little bit of grease. This is not something that would require leaven because it's just a little bit of grease. It's a little bit of moisture. That moisture that seeps through would not be something that would require leaven. That is just a bit of moisture seeping through. For that purpose, the kashering that we do in the oven is sufficient.
Thank you.
Good, let's leave it for that.
Thanks,
And
Rabbi.
I appreciate the idea of the Leila Seder ship. Bli neder, I'll try to fit that in. And for the meantime, we should know B'seres Tova is B'nisan Negalu, B'nisan Asidim Ligal, and Kimei Tzeichem Me'eret Mitzrayim. We should also see wonders. We should see Niflais, Bimher of Yameinu. Should be a wonderful time for all of us and for the Jewish people.
Amen.
Thank you.